has passed a really weird threshold now where we can make things that look and sound just like us. Like this. I burned $45 on AI headshots that are, fine. I see all the flaws in them, but who are these pictures for? They're actually not for me. They're for other people who won't see all the same flaws that I do. It's for social profiles and stuff like that, where people are scrolling by, they don't know exactly what I look like, so they don't care. Now, if you remember a few years ago, these apps got really hot for animating pictures of your ancestors. It was like, oh wow, great granddad's come back to life. And it was a fun little party trick. But that ain't granddad. You don't know what he would say, what he sounds like. He certainly wouldn't be singing Taylor Swift songs. That was just 3 years ago. But today, we can create clones of ourselves that are pretty much indistinguishable. I made this 6 months ago, and my wife couldn't tell which one was real. So that genie's out of the bottle. Given that this stuff gets exponentially better every year, assume you can now make a video of yourself doing just about anything. But what about your expertise? The way that you talk, what you would say, and what you know? But we've got tech for that now too that is pretty good. Check this out. It's an app called Delphi. It's answering a question instantly using over 100 hours of audio from my podcast as its knowledge. All of these chunks of text fed into that couple sentence answer. That just happened near instantly. But when I look at it, I have the same reaction I do to these AI generated photos of me. I can see you're trying, but that's not the real deal. That's not me.
That's not good enough.
But when is something that's close enough? If those AI generated images of me are good enough for people who don't know me online, is the clone of my expertise, while not being as good as me, the real deal, does it still have value? Could I put it to work in my business? Now, to frame this a different way, if you run a team and you begin hiring people to do what you do, many of them will not be as good as you at getting that thing done. Not unlike your clone, this avatar of your expertise. You can make the same argument about that, right? So it doesn't need to be exactly like you, as good as you at everything to have value. Let's explore that. I'm gonna run you through 3 use cases of how you could deploy an avatar of your expertise in your firm. First use case, internal team support. And let's just say this straight off the top. This thing's not going to be as good as the real deal, and it is not a replacement for building human relationships. But think back to when you were new at all this stuff. The hours, the days, the weeks you spent spinning your wheels in your chair because you were afraid to ask the question. This assistant, this avatar of your expertise for your team, this is instant answers. There are no dumb questions for this assistant. That would have been so useful for you when you are first starting out. Now, there are a number of ways that you can build this assistant now, but let's just start with the tool I referenced earlier, Delphi. As I mentioned before, it's trained on over 200 episodes of my podcast, which makes it a pretty darn accurate reflection of how I advise people on running small accounting firms. But you can already see the issue with this, right? That's cool, Jason, but I don't have 100 episodes of a podcast because I have a job. This avatar of you will only be as good as your expertise is documented. So begin to think, how can I document the sort of stuff that I'm usually telling my team? These are conversations you've had 100 times. You'll probably have one today where you walk them through a specific thing. And that person, they might remember it. They'll probably remember like 40% of it. But what this AI avatar is something that you can spend the same time with, train it once. It will never forget, and it will work for you 24/7 around the clock with as many people as have access to it. So is it worth taking the time to document yourself here? Should this be your next one-on-one? Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. And we wanna make this as low friction as possible. So what's a version of this that you will actually do and stick with? For me, writing is really hard, but I can sit down and yammer on about this stuff, like talk about it all day long. So here's what I do. The next time I have that conversation with the junior on my team, when I get back to my office, I'm gonna sit down and just record a little voice memo, answering that same question. It could be the voice memo app on your phone. You could use something like Otter, which will create transcripts of audio files. Their mobile app actually makes voice memos really easy. And with a service like Delphi, it is as simple as uploading that audio file or that transcript. And now anytime asks that avatar that question, it'll answer the same way that you did. Now the limitations here are obvious. What if it asks a new question? Well, it can't answer it. What if there's a bit of nuance there that's missed? Here's the thing to accept. Is it won't be as good as you, but it will get better over time the more you teach it. We're looking for situations where a version of your expertise is better than nothing at all. And I would argue supporting your junior team is one such situation. All right, use case number 2, marketing. No. I know. We're accountants, not marketers. It's the last thing we want to worry about. But if you've ever gone out and tried to hire a marketing agency to create content for you, to build content around the way that you advise, you know it's virtually impossible to get that stuff to align, to actually sound like your voice in something that you would say. That is unless your marketing team has access to an avatar of your expertise, okay? Hypothetical. Let's say you ran a 1-hour webinar talking about something tax or accounting related. You can imagine how then taking that audio file, training it into an avatar, and telling the marketing team, go make a few bits of content from this, how them being able to leverage that would actually yield much more aligned marketing content. That's a massive opportunity for your firm to lower the barrier to making really high quality content to target your next dream client. But the blocker in this example will be the same as in all the other examples. It's the context you can provide it with. How documented are you? Now, here's a hot take for you. For all the AI security spookies out there, the ironic thing is the most powerful redaction tool we've ever had is large language models. If you think about a meeting transcript from a conversation with a client, you could not write a script, a bit of code, that would strip all of the personally identifying information from that transcript. It's too unstructured. You make these sort of half references to different things. But a language model can do this really, really well. Remove anything personally identifying or sensitive from this conversation, replace all those references with brackets redacted. And the good news is, we have secure ways to use language models. In fact, with a bit of work, you could even run language models locally that could redact the transcripts of your client meetings. Because if you're looking for a way to build a bunch of context around how you would advise, man, what do people do all day in professional services businesses? They talk to clients. Imagine if all of those conversations, the sawdust of your professional services business, became the context that drove this clone of your expertise. I'd argue it's actually possible today. If we're able to redact those meeting transcripts, then every single time you take an advisory meeting, that clone of your expertise, it's getting better.
I am better!
Isn't that wild? Man. Okay, last use case, and this is the uncomfortable one. Oh, don't worry, we're already uncomfortable. A client-facing advisor. And I don't know if the tech is to the point where I would feel confident rolling this out today. On the one hand, this thing is only going to parrot the things that you have already said. On the other hand, I don't want to be liable for it spewing out something that doesn't make sense for a client's situation. But couldn't the same be said about a blog post, a social media post? So we're still navigating kind of what this all means and what's in bounds. But here's why we should open our minds to it in the future. Take two advisors that are otherwise the same. You know that most of the conversations you have with your clients are conversations that you've had with other clients 100 times before. It's very rare that you're going out and researching and learning something new. And if this avatar of your expertise contains the subject matter of all those conversations you've already had, it's probably gonna be able to answer a lot of those common client questions just fine. So going back to those two advisors that are otherwise the same, if one of them offers an avatar of their expertise that is available 24/7 around the clock, that their clients can access and chat with anytime, is that service offering going to be more valuable than that of the advisor who doesn't have an assistant? Where the only way you can get access to them is by hopping on a call, having to send an email, take up their actual time. This is hard to get our heads around right now, but I would argue that the advisor that has an avatar of their expertise can deliver more value at scale than the one who doesn't. Pretty exciting stuff. And it may still feel far off, but I'll tell you arguably the coolest use case of AI right now that is not far off, that will save you a pile of time today, man, using AI vision models to process accounts payable with today's sponsor, MakersHub. Roll the music. We did a sponsored demo day on the channel recently. Genuinely mind-blowing how AI vision models are massively improving how we extract information from documents. And these vision models will actually impact a lot of accounting workflows, not just AP, but 1040 tax prep, processing receipts. Vision models are now way better than OCR ever was at pulling that information off of documents. And when you combine those capabilities with the ability of a language model to apply a little bit of reasoning for that, like that scenario that still doesn't quite make sense, but it just needs to make a decision one way or another, that actually takes us a huge step further down the road and how much all this stuff can be automated. MakersHub specifically is doing wildly intricate, detailed extraction off of invoices in a way that will make both your simple AP needs way easier to navigate, but also the really complex ones, where you have to pull super detailed line item detail off of every invoice. It even lets you create rules on the fly so that if it gets something wrong, it will never get the same thing wrong twice. I had Clients who were paying multiple people to sit there and oversee the entry of detailed invoice line items. And we could have come in and delivered an accounts payable service to automate it down to a wee little baby job. And it kind of feels like maybe for the first time, we may genuinely be removing the manual entry work, despite these companies saying that OCR is going to eliminate manual entry for like the last decade plus. And you're like, yeah, no, I still need to make sure this is all right, because it usually isn't. It feels like we're actually way closer to that reality, completely eliminating manual entry. Really cool. To learn more about MakerSub, check out the link in the video description or some of the past demo days we've done with them. It is a weird time to be an accountant, okay? You are either feeling very excited or fully scandalized right now. If you want to geek on this further, we've actually been talking about this sort of thing a lot on my podcast recently. I'll put a link to that below. The accountants hanging out on that podcast are genuinely like the most progressive folks in the profession who are exploring new ways that we can lean into AI with the goal of helping more people than ever before. Now, if you're new here, be sure to hit subscribe right down next to that like button. Thanks for coming and hanging.